and welcome to Masters of Creativity. Thank you for joining us from around the world. And it's late for some of you, it's early for others. And today, I'm lucky enough to have the opportunity to invite Lisa Leong here, all the way from Melbourne. So what's it, 6 a.m. for you?
It is 6 a.m. Been up for hours, Jow. We're all good here. It's a little bit dark outside.
Yeah, nice and sunny here. So Lisa and I actually met recently, but we have a lot in common. But the first thing we have in common is that through the D.school, Lisa was a participant here and knew Jeremy from customer-focused innovation program we had in like 2016. So at that point, you were still a lawyer, in my understanding?
I was in a law firm and I was starting to dabble in innovation, and my nickname at the time was the diminutive disruptor because people started to get worried. And
I like to call her. I like to call her the rapping innovator. Personally,
yeah.
My personal favorite name you had was Lethal Lisa, so we didn't visit all those.
I have some random nicknames, I must say.
Yeah, but they've worked together in the past. Jeremy is actually in Lisa's book, so I'm lucky enough to be able to connect with Lisa here. What are we getting the book out?
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, snap, brother. Here, hang on, let me sign yours. Let me just sign it. Sign it on the inside.
Would you sign my forehead too, please, Lisa?
Yeah, hang on.
A lot of real estate there. A lot of real estate. All right, good. We're good.
There we go.
All right. Yeah, but I feel lucky enough to be able to host Lisa today because talk about a few of the things we have in common and a few of the different things she's done. So after coming to the D.school here, she went back and brought human-centered design, to law in the wine industry. And stop me anytime if I'm mischaracterizing that. She had a Harvard law case study written about her. She gave a TEDx talk about can robots make us more humans? And she came back to Stanford a few years later to talk to our cohort here. Now, the thing, so aside from like overlapping with Stanford.
Remember that, Jeremy? So just to set the scene, so these are some high-level executives. There was a new cohort. And so Jeremy said, hey, Lise, do you want to come back and do a bit of a speech to the, and so we had a panel of us doing the speech. And at the end, I said, now you don't mind if I sing a song? And I had this backing tape and I put on the backing music for the song. And one of the most amazing things that I've ever experienced, so usually when I sing, particularly in Australia, the response is usually sort of a bit of shock, maybe sort of embarrassment on my behalf. But no, not at Stanford D.school. I started singing and everyone started harmonizing back and they were like, woo, yeah, sister. And seriously, it was amazing. And so everyone's harmonizing back at me and I had such a good time. So just enduring. And I keep that with me when people
One of my top 10 favorite moments, I've been at Stanford now 15 years. One of my top 10 favorite moments of my 15 years.
Oh, hang on.
So I think having the sound effects really shows Lisa's current career, that she's currently a podcast host on ABC in Australia, radio. So
that's why I have a big microphone, Jow.
Yeah.
And just to say, so another thing we have in common is that we have Thai heritage. So Jow is Thai. He's whole Thai. I'm kind of half Thai because my mum is Thai. But that's it in terms of being, in common, because apparently Jow is about 8'2". Some crazy, nobody knows what is that, Jow? 8'2".
And no basketball skills whatsoever. I'm like a disgrace to the rest
You could have been Thailand's great basketball star. Unfortunately, no hand-eye coordination.
Can't catch, can't throw. Another thing we have in common is that we both worked in Queensland at some point in life. So, and that's where you were on commercial radio there, right? Before.
I was on 102.9 Hot Tomato.
Yeah.
And yeah, I used to do the late night Australian music show called Thong with Lisa Leong, because thongs are things that you put on your feet like flip flops, just to let you know, in Australia. So it was an Australian music show called Thong.
Well, so we've covered that you're a lawyer, you've been on
Mm.
commercial radio, you're on public radio, you've lived a variety of places in the UK, and I think the common theme here is that careers are really no longer linear. Like if you look at your CV now, in your profile now, it's outstanding, but it's unusual. It's unusual to perhaps I would have been perceived 20 years ago. And you bounce around, and I think like one
Yeah,
of
yeah, absolutely. So in the year 2000, when I was a lawyer, I'd been a lawyer for 7 years. And in that time, having a CV where you were in one place for your whole lifetime, your whole career lifetime, was absolutely the way to go. And I announced at that time in 2000 that I was just going to leave my law firm to join another law firm in London. And it was actually controversial at the time. And so the partner that I was working with took me aside to say, if you go, you will possibly put your career back. I can no longer sort of sponsor you anymore. Think very carefully about leaving the law firm. So I wasn't even leaving the law. But now, then I sort of have jumped around. So I went to radio, and then I went back to the law firm, but this time in client relationship. And even that was seen to be quite different. Now, of course, you look at your CVs now, and people look at my CV bouncing around, and they think, wow, that actually is a lovely curated career. And it makes sense because there's different parts of you that you're expressing at that time. But certainly in those days, it was rare. And certainly for people like my parents, that was unusual. So we wanted to talk about today, didn't we, Jao, this idea of careers no longer being linear.
yeah, and I mean, if you're accepting that careers are no longer linear, or where you might be, what you're doing today might not be what you're doing next year, next month, or somewhere downstream. How do you plan for that? How do you plan for what's next?
And one point on that was this idea of seeing your career as analogous to driving a car. So you're driving a car, and this is in the book, and you're in the driver's seat. Your car is filled with people who are helping you and they have your best interests at heart. Some of them are sitting there and, they're just sort of quietly telling you, oh, here are the directions. Then you've got your backseat drivers who are literally shouting at you and influencing you. And what you don't want is to arrive and go, why am I here? Because I don't actually want to be here. So you've got the steering wheel here. And if you think about you being the driver, then you can actually start to map, well, what are the influences in my life? You can do a genealogram, if that's helpful, to map out, parents, what are their work attitudes, what work did they do, and then even go to grandparents, other really strong, influential people in your life. And then you can start to realize and thread out, okay, which part is me and which part is the other. And so that's kind of one place to start. But Jao, I might share my little pivot story on how I got into radio from the law. What do you think? Should I?
I think it's fantastic, and I think it really fits in well with Mate's comment in chat about how technology moves so fast, and which is a perfect segue to what happened with technology, which got you in radio, right? So, love to hear that story.
I was a wine lawyer, as Jao was saying, so in intellectual property, and then in the year sort of late 90s, then the internet, started really developing. And so I became an internet lawyer. So we focused on things like what happened when you connected between websites. And I took that chance to go to London And so I left my law firm and I went to another law firm in London, and I started working on these really sexy deals. So there were these two Danish financiers, and they were tall and dashing, and I was basically their little lawyer. And so I was we were working all throughout Europe, and we were doing the rollout of digital TV. And it was really cool. But then the internet bubble burst, and a lot of the financing just fell under. They lost their deals, and I lost my legal work, and I started working on these really big transactions. And as a technology lawyer doing mergers and acquisitions, my job was to look at all the technology contracts to determine whether or not they were good or bad for the future purchase. Effectively, I was by myself in an airless, windowless office, poring over these contracts for hours and hours, and my soul just shriveled up. But I started thinking, this kind of forced stop made me realize, I was waiting for someone to tap me on the shoulder to say, you don't, belong here. Actually, you belong somewhere else. And nobody tapped me on the shoulder. So sometimes you have to tap yourself on the shoulder. So what I did then was I asked around and I said, look, I want to take my 10% of time that I'm putting back into the law firm to MC all the Christmas parties, and I'd like to, put that time somewhere else. So somebody said, have you heard of hospital radio? The hospitals are so big in London that they have radio stations for the hospital. And so you get trained up in all the paneling and everything. And then my first show that I joined was called Monday Night Bingo. So I used to go out and hand out the bingo cards to the patients. Then I'd come downstairs, we would put on our show, and then I would read out the numbers like legs 11, 22, two little ducks, quack, quack. And then after a amount of time, you get your own show. So I created my own show, learned how to panel. I called it Thursday Night Therapy with Lisa Leong. And I would interview all my friends. I'd be like, Jeremy Utley, come on, let's do an interview. And so I started building this show, and it got quite popular. Now, maybe because it was a captive audience, because I couldn't move. But in any event, it was awesome. And I went, you know what? I want to be a radio presenter forever. This is it. This is my flow. I'm loving it. And so I sent out my demo, and I got a whole heap of rejection letters. And I can just say that, and I'm not feeling how I felt when I opened up those rejection letters. But to be honest, at first I was like, oh, that's a bit disappointing. And then I started it really threw me. So if anyone has ever applied for a job and just got that feeling of, what was I thinking? Like I really was ruminating, I have a bogan voice. What was I even thinking? I'm trained to be a lawyer. I'm not trained to be a radio DJ. This is obviously a message from the universe. You are crap.
I want to say this is the first time anyone has used the word bogan in any Master of Creativity series. For the non-Australians out there, that's like the equivalent of a redneck or someone from...
Yeah, just like, like not a posh voice. So I thought, well, just to pack it up, like that's it. But then I thought, yeah.
It seems like what you're hitting on is you had this, like, at that point in life, you still failure, and the fear of failure was still top of mind for you. So
yeah, and absolutely, the rejection, the failure, the what am I thinking, and that rumination was absolutely part of my makeup. And I'm not used. I think definitely as a high achiever, sometimes you're just not used to faltering. But then I actually thought, well, who's making the decision? And so this is kind of my empathy point, which is I started thinking about the decision makers, and the decision makers are really busy. They don't actually have time possibly to listen to any demos. It's all automatic, it was kind of like just send out the letter. So I actually went, well, who is a program manager who's accessible. And so there was one radio station, Liberty Radio, largest footprint in the whole of London. They were on the outskirts of London. Their program director, the decision maker, is also the breakfast presenter. I took the first train out and decided to cold call him. So I basically got to the radio station. It was 6 a.m. It was dark outside. It was sleeting. I was listening on my transistor radio. And when he took a break, I had a thought, I've got to press this doorbell and cold call. But I was petrified. And so I went through what is the worst that can happen. The scenario, is A, he could basically not answer. B, he could answer and get really angry and reject me, and that would make me sad. And then C, he could call the police. So I thought, oh, wow. And then I thought, let's flip it. What if it works? And so I stood there and I pressed the doorbell. Hello? Hello. My name's Lisa Leong. I'm a radio DJ. I was wondering if I could make you a cup of coffee this morning. All right. So he buzzed me in and I walk up the stairs. I make him a cup of coffee. He sits me down and in the breaks he talks to me and he said, hey, why are you cold calling me? Who are you? And I said, oh, blah, blah, blah. We had a good chat. And then guess what? Next week, exactly the same thing, 6 a.m, it's sleeting and then I ring the doorbell. Hi, it's Lisa Leong, that radio DJ. I'm here to make you a cup of coffee this morning. He lets me in again, and this time he puts me on the air with him. It's like we're doing the breakfast show together. And I did it every weekend until he was so sick of me. He gave me my own Sunday show on Liberty Radio all over London. And that was actually my breakthrough, getting on radio, get the demo tape together. I sent it off to Australia. I got into the radio school and became a radio presenter from there.
That was your transition.
Yeah.
And I think here at the D-school, we talk a lot about failure being part of the process, or like we teach a lot of ways to deal with failure. How did you do that? Like, how did you get over that? I mean, you alluded to it about.
So when I actually studied science law, Jao, and I know that you studied engineering. And one of the key principles is this idea of having a hypothesis. So you have a theory and then you go and test it and you run an experiment. And so the main thing that I do from that moment really is to treat every day as lab day. So the mantra is, if every day is lab day, how would you live your life? And you live your life with hypotheses and running experiments. And if the experiment fails, you don't fail. You are not a failure. So it's this idea of just like try something, and yes, sometimes you falter, but then pick yourself up, dust yourself off and go again.
What's your hypothesis for today or yesterday?
So it would be when I wake up, it would be somebody asking me to do a project. So I might look at my emails and somebody says, hey, would you do this podcast for me? Would you coach me? And so my hypothesis would be something around my career, which would be I enjoy intimate conversations with people, and therefore why don't I try the coaching? So I've been, sort of doing some executive coaching recently. So that would be the hypothesis. Now I might try it and then I might think, not for me. Or I might try it and say, okay, now it's overwhelming because I've got 20 people that I'm coaching. So that's kind of an example of how you would apply it for your career. But I do want to look at this idea of failure, and I wanted to play a bit of a game. Are you up for that?
I'm up for a game. Can everyone else play too? Can they turn their camera on?
Yeah, I'd love it if everyone would play with me, and maybe we go into gallery.
Yeah.
If everyone can go gallery view. So let's all go gallery view. Okay. So what we're going to do is, it's a game from Stanford. If anyone's worked with Dan Klein, he's an absolute favourite of mine. And he taught me when I was at D.school something called 1, 2, 3 fail, which doesn't work on Zoom. So we're not going to play that game, but we're going to play his variation, which is called pyramid clap. Are you ready to play? So what I'm going to do, Jow, is I will go through the instructions and then we'll all do it together. So first of all, I'm going to go through the instructions. So I'm going to just switch camera here. So can you see me on that camera there?
Yep. Thumbs
Because
up.
I need you to see me. Okay. So I'm going to tell you how to build the pyramid clap. So this is how you build a pyramid. You slap your thighs and then you clap once. And then you slap your thighs and you clap twice. And then you slap your thighs and then you clap 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then that's like the base. It's like an inverted pyramid. So you got to slap your thighs again and then you're going to build the base again. 1, 2, 3. And then 1, 2, 1. So that's the pyramid. So just go slap 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Did you understand that so far? Okay, so that is the pyramid, and we're going to just switch our cameras over to this one. All right, so that is the pyramid. Now, here are the rules. Number 1, I want you to go as fast as you can. So we're going to keep on building that pyramid over and over again. I'm going to give you 15 seconds to build it, and you're going to build it as many times as you can over and over and over again. So I want you to push yourself. It's like extreme pyramid clapping. As fast as you can go. And here's the second rule. If you make a mistake, okay, here's the rule. If you make a mistake, absolutely nothing happens. Just keep on going, okay? There are no consequences here because we're on Zoom, so I can't do anything here. So go as fast as you can, push your boundaries. I want you to make a mistake. Does everyone understand the instructions?
I'm the guinea pig here as well, and along with everyone.
Okay. So Jow's going to do it. I'm going to do it. And
Everyone's
I'm going to give you a 15-second and then it'll have a buzzer. Okay? Are you ready to go? Pyramid clap. Go. I'm sweating.
Are you doing Jeremy over there?
It was unexpectedly a pec workout. I'm just being honest.
That's an interesting technique you've got there, Jeremy, using the pecs there. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to run a poll to get your feedback, okay, everyone who's tried it. So here is the poll.
No.
How did you feel when you made a mistake? 100% accuracy. I went so slow, I didn't make a mistake. I laughed when I made a mistake. I chastised myself. I went as fast as I could. I made plenty of mistakes. All right. And we have 100% answers. All right. Thank you for your answers. So, if you answered 100% accuracy, I went so slow, I didn't make a mistake. Your fear of failure is holding you back from trying. And I went as fast as I could. I made plenty of mistakes. I say Anya, and I'm assuming this is because it's a low stakes game, or should we be frightened? And for 2 and 3, I laughed when I made a mistake and I chastised myself. This is absolutely natural because we are actually conditioned to somewhat fear failure, and that conditioning starts at school when we don't do well, maybe in a paper or maybe at the end of the year, and you have a look at your grades and you say, oh, could I improve to get that little bit better? So it's always about sort of tweaking. And certainly when you become an expert, so with lawyers like Verity and myself, we are trained to look for errors, absolutely, and to eradicate mistakes. And so we are absolutely conditioned to look for the worst thing that can happen. Jow, how did you go with doing the pyramid clap?
I thought, I'm not very hand-eye coordinated. So how did it look from
You look really slow. Was it meant to be that
slow?
slow, Jow?
I felt like I was going super fast.
Well, it's that basketball thing. And, well, interestingly, when I asked you to do a hand-eye coordination exercise, how did you feel about that, given what you shared about your basketball history?
I already I already felt like, oh no, this is I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail at this because historically, none of these sort of activities, really go my way. So I've been
Right.
following for the last 20 years with this.
Right. And
problem.
maybe it was in there. Maybe that's why you were going so slow, Jow.
I thought I was going fast. So
Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm just going to run that exercise again. But what we do the second round is that we reverse things. So physiologically, instead of sort of crouching or doing the things that we do when we make a mistake, which is kind of hunching, we're just going to expand out. So there's the idea of expanding out your chest, and we're actually going to go woo when we make a mistake. Okay, woo. So right, we just hold up our hands and just go woo. Woo. So we're going to do that again. I'm going to give you 15 seconds. Just go as fast as you can go, but every time you make a mistake, I want you to make lots of mistakes. We're just going to go woo like that. Okay? So let's just do it for another 15 seconds. Go. Woo! 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 Oh, man. Okay. So I just want to know, Jow, how did you go that time?
I had more fun with it, because each mistake wasn't the consequence was a celebration. I want to see how Jeremy's pecs were from that.
Jeremy.
Yeah.
I think it helped that I was alternating with my shoulder muscles. Because there's just a lot of squeezing, right? But here it throws it in other directions. So I'm good for the day. I don't need any more.
So we can't reverse things permanently, or there's a lot of conditioning there, but bringing awareness to how we naturally react when there are mistakes. And it's not just what we tell people as well, because it's, in modern workplaces, of course, we do say fast fail a lot. We say things like, I'm okay with mistakes, but pay attention to how you are with your own mistakes, because it's that leadership shadow, that feeling of, well, you're saying one thing, but you're really chastising yourself. That's the part where people in the workplace are watching and learning from your behavior. So watching how is your conditioning playing out in the workplace, I think, is an important point. Now, this is a point about micro bravery as well. So the one takeaway is little acts of bravery along the way maketh the career, in a way. It's that act of courage, that trying something different. And it's easy to say. So, I've got a new Sunday show that I'm building, in our radio network. And there's a lot of eyes and ears on the show. I'm holding it very tightly, and I noticed that I was holding it tightly because I want it to be a success. And even though I know that, I know the philosophy and I wrote a book about it, it's really hard to do. And so how do I sort of hold it so that everything matters and nothing matters? Everything matters because I'm preparing a lot, doing all my research. And then in that moment of broadcasting, nothing matters. It's okay if I make a mistake. Don't cross to the call properly, fumble, stutter. It's okay. everything matters and nothing matters. And I think sort of taking that with your career and being aware about that, I think it's an important point.
That everything and nothing matters. That's a very deep insight we're getting today. But having that sort of mentality to your career or in the workplace, that might not be the norm. That might not be the social norm of the dynamic there. So really, like, how do you manage being standing out or being that one that's different?
Yeah. I am standing here in a gold sequin jacket. So, well, can I just say, so another philosophy I've borrowed from branding and marketing, and it's category of one. So you may have heard of category of one in your marketing MBA or travels. It is where a product or a service is so unique, it has its own market, and therefore it is in its own category of one. There are no competitors. Now, as a thought exercise, what would it be like to think of your own self as a category of one? Nobody was born when you were born, the same time you were born, where you were born, your parents, your experiences, school, those little moments. Nobody else. So you are a category of one. And if you think about yourself as a category of one, there are no competitors. And in fact, it's quite freeing when it comes to your career, because if you pay attention, like a forensic scientist, then you can actually think about the fact that you can build a career that is your career. Nobody else could actually execute the career, your career, because you are a category of one. So it's incredibly freeing because there really is no competition there. And one exercise that I'd like to share with you in order to figure out how to see yourself as a category of one is called the life flow exercise. Now, when I came up with this in the year 2000, I called it the happiness graph, and I completely created it, and I thought it was wonderful. And then when we actually got Google, and then I Googled it, I realized that it had been invented by many, many people. So it's one of those great inventions that somebody else had actually already created. So, Jao, do you want to show, this is my life flow exercise.
Yeah, sure thing. This is a perfect segue, as we had a question from Raluca about how do you trick your mind to believing it?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, I'm going to teach you how to do a life flow exercise. So you'll see that the vertical is the happiness level. This is subjective, and it's just highs and lows of your life as you perceive it. On the bottom, the horizontal, it is time. Go back as far as you can remember. Now, for the purposes, this comes from the book. For the purposes of the book, I just went back to my work life. But actually, it's really instructive to go back to childhood if you can remember. And then you take your sort of piece of paper and you'll see that you map it as peaks and troughs. Peaks and troughs. So peak experience and then the troughs. And then you go and you write any factors that made a trough and any factors that made a peak experience a peak experience. And so, one of the troughs for me was when the internet bubble burst in the year 2001. And I felt alone. I was stuck in this windowless office, and then I realized money isn't everything. So that was that bottom point. And then I went and discovered radio, and so that became a peak. But I want you to see that then there's another trough where I became a commercial radio DJ. And basically, hilariously, so I'd done all this training, which was really good. And in my first and second jobs, so the second job was capital city radio. This is like the bee's knees, gold, woohoo moment, dream job to get on commercial radio, hot music. And that was when I had the nickname Lethal Lisa. So I've got this awesome job, but then I was doing these 6-hour shifts on the weekend. So I was doing weekend breakfast, 6 till 12, and I would come out and I would cry, and I couldn't figure out why I was so sad. And I realized, oh no, I'm alone in a windowless, airless office talking to myself, because that's what you do in commercial radio. And so it was only when I started mapping it out that I realized, okay, guess what? I don't really like being alone. The things that float my boat are collaborating with others. So, Jao, you can stop that screen share now. But I guess the takeaway is mapping out your life flow and then actually taking the time to reflect and analyze it and notice if there's any themes there. And remember, this is a hypothesis. So all you're doing is, like a forensic scientist, you are looking for data. And there are little clues along the way. And this is why, going back to childhood, I think Jao is really instructive, because when I went back and realised, there was a couple of times, where I was either on the stage in, grade 6, or even my first job at Safeway supermarket. I was a liquor assistant, and when I was 18, I was terrible at my job because I was so tiny that I couldn't lift anything. Like, I could barely lift a bottle of wine. And when I asked people for their ID, they would look at me, and I had braces and glasses then, and they would say, "Well, give me your ID." So like I was terrible, but when nobody else wanted to get on the loudspeaker, and so they would let me get on the loudspeaker to announce the red spot specials. So I'd be like, "Red spot special, slabs walking out the door for $20.99." Throughout the whole supermarket. And then everyone would be laughing. I'll be like, come and get a flagon of port. And, that was me. And now I look back and I go, well, I think there's a few clues there as to my career.
That was the start.
Slabs walking out the door. $20.99.
Get your stubbies on the way out.
Yeah, that's right. That's like 24 beers. And that's a bargain, can I just say?
It seems like what you're alluding to, driving at, is that you had this. It's the way you framed that job, where everyone else was framing it negatively for you, that you shouldn't be there, or there's other people that can do it better. But you were there, and you crafted the task. Yeah,
spot on. So once you start analysing, okay, when am I in flow? What floats my boat? Then you can start to do two things. So one of them, which I do cover in the book, is this idea of job crafting. So there is a body of research, and it's very deep, and it goes into how do we view our jobs and sort of curate it, even the job you have right now, to this idea of category of one. And there are three things that you can do. You can relationship craft. Who are you hanging out with? Who are you collaborating with? You can task craft. So which parts of my job do I really want to go deep on and do more of? And then there's cognitive crafting. So cognitive crafting is, they did a research study on hospital cleaners, and the sort of more sad ones were going in there and saying, "Ugh, I'm just cleaning up your rubbish. And, you're making my life just misery because you're leaving rubbish around." The happier hospital cleaners cognitively had crafted their jobs to be, I am contributing to the health and well-being and the improvement of the patient experience. So I'm coming in and I'm doing these things, and I am part of this. And so that's cognitive crafting. So that's the idea of the current job. Now, when you're doing this, then you're getting more and more of yourself in your role. And so that's what I did. But then at some point, then I spun out and I decided, well, actually, I'm going to have to do this outside this institution in order to fulfill this and take this hypothesis to the next level. And so then I, spun out And so that takes me to the second part, which, Jiao, is this idea of portfolio career. So this is another helpful concept, and it's quite recent. Dory Clark introduced me to this idea. And I know that in Stanford, you talk a bit about the portfolio of ideas. So this is very similar. So it's this diversification, this idea of you having a career which has many strings to your bow. So rather than seeing things as a side hustle, so I was a consultant with a side hustle of broadcasting. And that when I describe it like that, there's a tension there, like I'm sort of flipping between switches. Whereas when Dory said, no, you've got a portfolio career, and the mix can change. So broadcasting, was at 25%, and now it's at 75% right now. But, it might change. That's okay. Portfolio career. So I'm just managing, with the coaching, do some speaking, write a book, just put it in the mix, portfolio career. So that's one way of looking at things, which, might be helpful.
Yeah, that really dives into or reinforces what Jeremy teaches at the D.school around having that portfolio of ideas, that to get to the good ones, or to get to like the few good ones, you really need in scale of thousands to get there. So.
And also, Jiao, it's this idea of, one thing we learned in COVID is, let's say one part of your portfolio career falls down. So I was doing face-to-face workshops, and then suddenly I wasn't. So then I had my broadcasting, and that kind of was my little thing that propped me up for a good 6 months.
Yeah.
And had I not had a diversified portfolio career, I would have gone to zero.
Yeah, I'm sure many of us here with COVID had to make hard pivots, even just the way we operate, not being in person anymore and being on Zoom. But there's also opportunity that comes from it, right? Like here, you being in Australia, us being here in California, being able to connect with people from around the world.
So good.
The mental model might not have been there before.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I used to wait until I'll see Jeremy when I visit him. Visit Stanford and the D.school next, and that was probably once a year. Whereas now we've been doing a few collaborations, haven't we, Jeremy? And it's just been we've been able to do that through Zoom and not feel like we're missing out.
Yeah.
Oh, and just on that cognitive crafting, Jiao, so I remember when we first moved to Zoom, and this idea of a portfolio career, it is constructive, not destructive when you think about your career. An example of that is we had no face-to-face workshops, and early on I was thinking, well, I think we can do this online. Because in radio, when I'm broadcasting, nobody ever thinks, oh, I wish I had pictures today. Like, we don't think that, right? And whereas we were going online and people were like, oh, I wish we were face to face. Oh, I wish we were, could touch, and wish we could do these. And I'm like, if we could bring that radio mentality, theatre of the mind, what might happen, then we can create an amazing and curate an amazing experience. And so that's constructive. That's all of my careers, can lend themselves, using sound effects or, every element of the experience, you can build something there. So.
All right. So, we're talking about being able to connect and maintain these connections. And there's a point you write in your book about having that you're doing this with a squad, that no one travels this journey alone. So, and even us here, like reconnecting every few weeks to get together and learn and share our experience with each other. So how's that been like? Or what has that been like in your career, having this squad of explorers?
Yeah, so even though you're a category of one, doesn't mean you go it alone. It means that you join forces with other categories of one and you become aware of the superpowers of others. And when you join forces, definitely the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So I think, especially, well, I realized doing my life flow, I really don't like to go it alone. So even when writing a book, I decided to write it with a co-author, Monique Ross, who is a journo. I'd met her at the ABC. I asked her if she wanted to write a book with me, and I sort of made sure, I think, that along the way we found joy in all the small moments rather than being fixated with the output or outcome, especially when it comes to a book. You know, you don't want to really be fixated on the end, because the end is quite a long way away and there's a lot of writing to do in between. And so I said to her, hey, we're just going to have fun collaborating. Now, she's actually in Queensland and I'm in Victoria. And so we did use a Google Doc. We collaborated and we actually have a blended voice in the book. So it was a really different collaboration, and people are surprised when I talk about being a co-author, because usually it is quite fraught, because writing can be seen as a solitude, a solo endeavor. But we had a lot of fun doing it, and every time because you don't just pop out a book. There's lots and lots of people involved. So Owen Summers, who is our amazing commissioning editor, she was in the Google Doc early and we saw her as a partner. Then every editor, anyone who touched the book, we asked to meet them, get to know them, get to understand them. Our illustrator, who's in New Zealand, met her, Julia, got to understand her, wanted her to use her superpowers for the book. Arthur from Booktopia met him, wanted to understand his superpowers for the book. So it sort of went on. And then I decided, because my husband is a filmmaker, I thought, you know what? Why is it that films have soundtracks? I think this book should have a soundtrack. And so I found this singer-songwriter who I love. She's 20. Her name's Little Green. And I asked Hardy Grant, the publishers, to commission her. So she was commissioned to bring the book to life with a soundtrack, and it was released on Spotify as an EP, so you can actually listen to it on Spotify. It's called This Working Life, the soundtrack. And in the book there are QR codes that you can click on as you're reading, and it brings the book to life. So it brings the theme. So one of the themes, and we're going to end with the music video clip from the book. So then the publisher paid for a producer to produce the music. So it's wonderfully produced. And then I got Darcy, my filmmaker husband, to create a music video for the book. So we spent one day, it was me and Mon and the singer-songwriter Little Green and a lot of Darcy's film students. And we basically created a music video clip for the first single from the soundtrack of the book, This Working Life. And it's called Oak Tree. And if you listen to the words, it's about finding your superpowers and a very, very small oak tree.
Yeah, we'll play that. We'll play that as to end the program. And your co-author is very different from you, isn't she?
She's a forest bathing nature guide. So she actually pivoted her journo career. She retrained, and she now lives out in, the sticks and takes people for these forest bathing nature guides. But she also does sort of corporate work where she sends you a little tree, a bonsai tree, and she will take you on these kind of beautiful moments. And at the end of each chapter, so this is using her superpowers, I said, I want you to navigate us through the book like you're navigating a forest bathing nature walk. And at the end of each chapter, we have a sit spot. So she's written these incredible moments where you take the book and you pay attention to, the theme of the chapter, and you just do a bit of reflection, and it's just gorgeous. And then she's written a chapter about nature at the end of the book as well. So it's a very it's a nurturing book. It should be nourishing. It's not really a business book.
Well, it's nice to hear. Well, as we're, I just had the video pulled up, and the images are so vibrant, and it's a lot of trees. So we'll share that with everyone. For everyone, can we do what we do here at the D-School clap is a fireworks applause. So if everyone can turn on their video, we just want to give a big shout out, a big thank you to Lisa for getting on at 6 a.m. Up here in Melbourne, down there in Melbourne, and sharing her experiences with us. So I'm gonna do a count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, wow. Hang on. I'll just do this.
There we go. Yeah, you have to
I'll bring my own sound effect.